Welcome back. Now, the Judicial Service Commission is conducting interviews for judges in major courts in the country. The vacancies that should be filled are at the Constitutional Court, Supreme Court of Appeal, Land Court, Labour Court and the Labour Appeal Court and various divisions of the High Court. Joining us is Professor Thuli Madonsela from the Stellenbosch University to unpack this further. Professor, a very good evening to you and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Masa, and to the viewers. Thank you for the privilege.
We've all been watching with bated breath the proceedings when it comes to the JSC interviews. They've been muddied and marred with a bit of politicism as well, and of course dragging them to court. We saw the MK party trying to halt these interviews. I guess if we can start, Professor, with the importance of these interviews and filling those vacancies.
It's very important that the interviews are held and vacancies filled. Firstly, we don't have enough judges. The country has grown, and the number of people we need to process those crimes is more than we needed before. So when there are vacancies, it makes the situation worse in terms of the efficiency of processing cases.
And practically, Professor, on the ground, what does that look like? Does that look like people's cases being delayed or taking longer than they should be? And when we're thinking about the kind of country that we live in, with the kind of crime stats that we have, we surely cannot afford for any of these kinds of delays.
Absolutely. I mean, the very fact that we are seeing about 53 judges being interviewed at once suggests there's been such a huge number of vacancies. Ideally, there should be 1 or 2 vacancies in each court as people resign or retire. Well, not resign, as people retire. So yes, you're right, Marcel. The people who have paid for having less judges on the bench are people who need their cases to be heard on time, completed and on time. And there are those who are waiting for justice when there's been criminality.
Staying on the MK party, which has been pretty central when it comes to this round of interviews with the JSC, considering their legal action that they also lost and the interviews have gone ahead. We heard today at that media briefing the former judge, now impeached judge, Dr. John Hlophe, who says the judiciary is captured, and he's speaking from experience. He says from the 29 years that he worked as a judge. How do you respond to those who feel that our judiciary is captured?
Well, I cannot say that they are right or wrong. I would say if you make an allegation, it is on you to provide evidence. For years, people have been saying the judiciary is captured, but they don't provide evidence, and then it just becomes mudslinging. State capture is real, and as a public protector, we investigated state capture, but there were concrete allegations on the table, and there was concrete evidence on the table.
What is the process as well? While we were watching those interviews as well, there was quite uncomfortable moments with some of those interviewees as well. For instance, who nominates you? Who accepts that nomination? That interaction that we saw as well with Advocate Gregory Ali and the Commissioner himself, it was quite uncomfortable to see as well, but also very alarming to think, how do we even get to that point of sitting through interviews if the process hasn't been followed correctly? So I guess my question to you, Prof, is what is the process and who is responsible for ensuring that that process is adhered to? And when that doesn't happen, who is then responsible for that?
Well, the process used to be managed by the Department of Justice, and presumably now it has moved to the Office of the Chief Justice. And any member of the public is entitled to nominate someone, although traditionally it had to be professional bodies nominating you, because it's basically your peers saying they believe, having worked with you, you're ready to serve at the next level as a judge or magistrate, if it's a magistrate's commission. And then a technical assessment of those nominations or applications is made just to make sure that everyone who has applied meets the technical requirements that we advertised. And if somebody doesn't meet those technical requirements as advertised, the selection committee, which would be the JSC, will be informed of all people who applied, but indicate why some need not be interviewed because they do not meet the basic requirements as advertised. And then the JSE then has its own shortlisting committee, and then ultimately they can't interview everyone who has been nominated. They have to interview those who have a real prospect of making it.
Yeah, one wonders then how then Advocate Gregory Ali then made it through that list to even get to the point of being interviewed. If he, like he admitted, he nominated himself, that nomination didn't come externally or from professional bodies, as you mentioned, that it should be coming from traditionally.
Well, no, Martha, it's a weird thing, actually. That has happened with the Chapter 9 institutions as well, is that because the law has not specifically said that you can't nominate yourself, people then do nominate themselves. I know when we did interviews for the Human Rights Commission that there were people who nominated themselves. So maybe the law should be more strict because the law was not very specific because those who drafted the law understood that people would go with the normative approaches, which was a professional body that knows you, that has worked with you, would nominate you, which is like vouching for you that we know so and so, they're competent, they have integrity, and they are able to manage conflict of interest in such a way that they don't favor anybody. So they've got the kind of independence that is required of judges.
I mean, just listening to some of those traits as well that the person should then have in competence, you know, have integrity as well. We also saw Chief Justice Mandisa Maya as well as Judge Dumsani Zondi warning against social media with one of the candidates as well. In your view, Professor, what makes then a good candidate to get through these interviews and get that post?
Well, the first thing is legal competence. The person understands the law and they're able to apply it. And this would be reflected in the cases they have been lawyers in or prosecuted as attorneys or as advocates. It would also be reflected in the judgments they've given as acting judges. So you would just look at legal competence, but you also have to look at constitutional competence. Their understanding that our constitution is a transformative constitution. And so your way of judging is not going to be like a judge anywhere else in the world. Justice Ismail Mohammed made it clear that our constitution is not like other constitutions. So it would require a judge whose interpretation of the law would achieve the transformation required in the Constitution, which is transformation in terms of making sure that government governs accountably, but transformation also that makes sure that we become more and more equal. And then thirdly, what is important would be the person is upright, has integrity. Again, it would be reflected in the fact that they haven't heard scandals in their lives that have substance. And here, usually the professional bodies are supposed to submit statements indicating that they know this person and this person has shown themselves to be a person of integrity, able to manage any conflict of interest and is not corrupt. Also, after these people have been nominated, the names are also submitted to members of the public who have an opportunity to express their own views regarding competence, honesty, ability to apply the Constitution transformatively, and just generally whether this person has lived their lives as somebody who embraces the new South Africa, so to speak, with its transformative ethos.
And briefly, just before I let you go, Professor, if you had to look into your legal crystal ball, looking at how the interviews have gone for this first week as well, do you think it's possible that we will be able to fill all those vacancies?
Masa, I haven't watched the interviews. I've had the most remarkable week with young girls and school teachers at collegiate in the Eastern Cape, and also we're planning a conference for next week. So I haven't watched the interviews. I've relied on little bits that people have chopped and shown online. And as it stands now, based on the fact that some people might not make it, I think the bulk of the positions will be filled. There may be a few that are not filled. But I read something written by Karen Moon that suggested that the current Chief Justice was very good at managing time, at making sure that not too much time was wasted in saying or doing things that were not necessary to determine the competence of any candidate.
Well, Professor, while you may not have had time to watch it in full, you do sound like you did have a remarkable and meaningful week indeed. So congratulations on that and all the best with that plans that you have in the Eastern Cape. And thank you for joining us this evening.